Welcome to U.S. Cricket Daily, your one-stop shop for all things Major League Cricket 2024. I'm Peter Della Penna, along with Aaman Patel, and coming up, we're going to review tonight's contest where MI New York downed LA Knight Riders to secure their spot in the playoffs and eliminate Knight Riders from playoff contention as Pollard showed up in a big way for MI New York as they completed a 4-wicket victory over Knight Riders, and we'll get to more of that in a bit. But first, I want to remind you that U.S. Cricket Daily is brought to you in association with Clyde Hill Publishing and its book imprints, Clyde Hill and Pulley Press, which are dedicated to founders, innovators, thinkers, and tinkerers everywhere. Pre-order our book on the rise of Major League Cricket in America at ClydeHillPublishing.com.
Yeah, Peter, you can also follow U.S. Cricket Daily on Instagram, X, and TikTok, and you can watch our episodes on YouTube. Just search U.S. Cricket Daily, hit subscribe, follow us, and rate us on Apple and Spotify because it really helps us. And if you want to get in touch, email us at hello@uscricketdaily.com.
We had a couple of consequential days over the weekend. First, on Saturday night, the San Francisco Unicorns not only secure a top 2 berth, so they'll get a chance to have 2 cracks at getting into the final by virtue of their win over the Seattle Orcas, but it also meant Seattle Orcas were eliminated, and it turned Sunday night's contest between the Knight Riders and MI New York into a shootout for the last remaining playoff spot. And LA Knight Riders, well, they produced a bit of a stinker, Aaman. Bowled out for 130 and 19.1 overs, and yet you were feeling very optimistic about their chances at the innings break, Aaman, during our WhatsApp chat. They disappointed you. They disappointed a lot of people, Aaman, in terms of what they produced in the field, as MI New York behind Pollard, who came out with by far his best performance of the season, 33 not out off 12 balls, 2 4s, 3 6s, to pulverize the LA Knight Riders bowling unit and get MI New York into the playoffs. They needed to chase the target in 18.2 overs to overtake LA Knight Riders on that run rate, and they did it in just 17 overs, and that was also a consequence of Cornet Dry bowling some very anticlimactic dot balls in that 17th over, but the top edge from Rashid Khan got the winning runs. So the Knight Riders miss out on the playoffs 2 years in a row, Aaman, for a marquee franchise. It's disappointing to say the least. How do you evaluate not just their season, but coming in to tonight with a playoff shot on the line, and they didn't really show up?
Yeah, I mean, when I put it in the group chat 1:30 and I said I thought the Knight Riders would be able to defend it, what I was looking at was it's the 6th game on this same surface. It's slowing up, and yes, I thought they were 10 runs short of probably what they wanted to be, about 140. I think 140 would have made it really tough, but this was a tough place to bat, and MI New York hadn't batted well. So when you look, if you're sitting here at LA, you're sitting here thinking, look, we're still in prime position. And honestly, I just felt that they let themselves down in the field. In terms of, I thought there were plenty of opportunities, and they talked about it extensively on the broadcast. Just felt the effort. There was some lack of effort inside the ring, opportunities to kind of save runs that weren't taken. Also, New York just had their best day. I think Pollard finally showed up, which was kind of the difference in this game, 33 from 12 in that spell that he had, and got his first boundary in quite some time, and just kept going from there. And that little spell of boundaries he hit, I think, changed the whole game and changed the complexion of it. But when I look at this Knight Riders team, I look at a team that never got it right with the bat, never got the combinations right, really. Jason Roy and Sonan Ryan did not click throughout this tournament. We talked about how bad the New York opening partnership was, and it was bad. 21 runs was their highest opening partnership, but you can say very similarly about the Knight Riders opening pair. They didn't have much going on, and just then Unmuk Chand was consistent at 1, but then you have Nitish Kumar and Saif Badar coming, I think, way too low for what they are. I thought they didn't do themselves justice in the draft. I thought having the number 1 overall pick, you have an opportunity to make a splash, make some things happen, and they go with Aditya Ganesh, who doesn't get a game in this tournament. And you're talking about you're picking someone, the first overall pick for $75,000 that you're paying them for the year, and you're not using them at all. And I can understand they thought they needed a wicketkeeper, and Unmuk might have beat him in competition, but they could have sat and waited and saved some money on that pick. They could have drafted a Hassan Khan, who's provided good stuff with the bat and the ball, in a position they drafted later on, and Daron Davis, who played just a couple of games, really only had a contribution with the terrific catch he took at third man. I just felt that this team didn't have the right combinations. I started with the draft, and then really Sunil Narayan or Jason DeRoy not firing what kind of killed this team, because they were banking on that top pair to play well, to start off strong, and then they could just kind of turn it over to David Miller and Andre Russell to save the day, and it just didn't turn that way for them. I thought they just didn't have the combinations right, and so going into next season, I really think you got to look and start right at the draft and address, okay, what do we desperately need, and how can we fix this?
I'm not sure I can add much more to that. Aman, well done. Well done. It starts from the draft. I mean, they shocked a lot of people. Aditi Ganesh, I mean, yeah, he was good in minor league cricket, but was he first overall pick worthy? I don't think so. And that was justified by the fact that they never played him. How little faith they had in their selection, and just the balance they had, or lack thereof. You've got Unmuk Chand, you've got Ganesh, you drafted a spot that you didn't need to fill. And then on top of that, Alex Carey is an overseas wicketkeeper. They had 3 wicketkeepers. Alex Carey we had on our podcast, and I felt kind of bad for him, because one of the questions I was going to almost tempted to ask him was, what's it like for you? How do you fill your time knowing that you're going to be on the bench all season? Because these leagues, when they're so short, once you have your first 11 in match 1, unless you've got a terrible season or there's a course of injuries, very rarely do teams change all that much, especially in a specialist position such as a wicketkeeper. And so he was probably never going to play, and he hasn't played. And then another thing I look at in terms of the balance, you contrast MI New York's lineup tonight having 2 spinners, and 2 very quality spinners, Rashid Khan, not just Rashid Khan, but Nash Kenjige, and the fact that they've got a domestic spinner. So they have that balance MI New York does, where they can choose Kenjige, and depending on how the matchups are, they could bowl overs with Reuben Clinton. If Stephen Taylor is the good books of the captain or the good books of the team leadership, and he's in the 11, he might bowl some off spin as well to go up against left-handers. The point is they had depth of options to cycle through, to choose from, whereas LA Knight Riders, they were very imbalanced, not just in terms of pace and spin, but also domestic versus overseas, and how their domestic and overseas options were, where each of those options were. They didn't really have a domestic spinner. So you've got Sunil Narayan, who bowled he was the best bowler tonight, but they didn't have another spin option. And you've got Shakib in the squad, you've got Adam Zampa, you've got Walker Salemkeel. I mean, they had spin options, but because of the fact that they didn't have any domestic spin options and the way their squad was configured overall, they were kind of hamstrung in that regard. And yeah, MI New York hasn't had the best of seasons, but in a must-win match, when they needed their guys to show up, because they have that balance, yeah, they had some off nights over the course of the season, and they had a great opening night, not much to shout about since then, but you look at their overall squad composition and how they're formed, they're geared to have much greater chances of success than the way Knight Riders are constructed. Yeah,
a lot of these teams, it is all about balance. And, me and you both kind of agreed earlier this season when we got asked the question, who do we think is the best team in the competition? We both said Washington. Why do we say Washington? Well, it's because not only do they have Steve Smith and Travis Head and Lockie Ferguson and Marco Janssen and Rachin Ravindra, but they also have Andres Kaus to give you some opening batting. If Andres goes down, the Hito Malanta's there to give you some depth. Obas Pinar in the back end. Mukhtar Ahmed can come in and hit the ball. They have some domestic spinners if they want to Milla Alponzo, Yasser Muhammad, Akhilesh Bodhigam. They have Saurabh Netravalkar, Justin Dillon, Ian Holland. They checked all the boxes. Even you look at San Francisco, they have a similar thing. Sanjay Krishnamurthy, Hassan Khan, 2 very good spin options. Even Kareem Gore is in that team. So you have 3 domestic spin options. You talk about Jamar Hamilton as a wicketkeeper who can come in and bat in a different role. He can also bat at 7 if they just need a bat down down the order. So they have these role players. And I look at the Knight Riders, and you're exactly right, Peter. I think Adam Zampa would have helped this team a lot, and you probably had to play Adam Zampa. The problem is, who do you take out? Do you take out Jason Roy? You're not taking out Sunil Ryan. He's your captain. He's the other spinner. You're not taking out Andre Russell, probably the best bat you've had. You're not taking out Spencer Johnson because he played so well. Are you daring to take David Miller, who's been one of the best T20 finishers? So what this team did in the draft was loaded all their domestic bats as top-order bats in Unmukt, in Nitish, in Saif. Are they good domestic bats? Yes. They all score runs. They all do phenomenal things in minor league cricket, but they all play the same role. They're all 1, 2, 3. I know Nitish came in and played a little bit of role at 6 in the USA team, but you could see he was out of place and played more comfortably coming in at 3 once we saw Aaman Patel go down. So these guys play 1, 2, 3 spots, and now you're trying to push them to play at 4 and 5 against better competition. So it just didn't make sense because you also knew Sunil Ryan was probably going to come back to open. So the way they constructed this team was everything had to go right. What they were hoping for was they wouldn't even need to worry about batting all 3 of Udmukt, Nitish, and Saif, because all that was going to happen was that Jason Roy and Sunil Ryan was going to bat 8 overs. You'll probably get to one of them, and then you just send in David Miller and Jay Russ, and end of story. What this team probably would have been better off doing was saying, okay, we're not going to play Saif Badar today, we're not going to play Nitish Kumar today, but we're going to play Shadley Van Skalkvik and Corne Dry, because it gives me some batting down low, I get another bowling option, but even then, you don't have that other spinner. This team, I thought, hindered themselves from way they selected. Like you said, Jerome Davis doesn't play, only played the 2 games. They probably could have played him tonight because of just the slowest nature of the wicket. It was just another season where the LA Knight Riders didn't have any combinations to speak of, and it kind of just boils back down to what they did with their domestic picks.
Now, they wasted $75,000 on Aditi Ganesh. It's probably the easiest $75,000 he's ever made in his life. Jason Roy, you brought up Jason Roy. Go through his season scores. 2 on the first game against Texas Super Kings, 26 against San Francisco Unicorns, then 69 in a losing cause against Seattle Orcas. That was his best score of the season. 12 against Washington Freedom, 27 against the Orcas again, and then 27 against MI New York tonight. And playing a shot which was heavily criticized by the commentators on here, especially Matthew Hayden, where he'd had 3 4s and a 6, 27 on 23 balls at that point, and then had a heave across the line against Rashid Khan, and Matthew Hayden was making the point that, A, Jason Roy is much better driving straight down the ground. He can go for 6 back over the bowler's head. And B, why is he trying to take on Rashid Khan instead of seeing him off and taking on some of the other options, which you have a guy making his debut, Rishal Ugarkar, and generally pace was easier to play than spin. That's borne out by the stats on the scorecard, as Kenjige and Rashid Khan both went for 22 and 4 overs, whereas the pace on the ball was much more expensive, with the exception of Kyron Pollard, who only needed to bowl 1 delivery and got a very important wicket. But, Jason Roy, he's the highest priced guy in this LA Knight Riders lineup. They had a huge pay packet to get him, $175,000, I believe it was, to come over from England. Is there any sense of buyer's remorse for Jason Roy?
I don't think, it's hard to say, right? Because you're talking about the fact that he hasn't scored. Didn't score much in Season 1, Season 2. Has gotten starts, but hasn't gone over the hump.
That's the main thing. You look at his scores, it's not like he's not scoring per se,
exactly.
But, 26, 12, 27, 27. When you're at that price tag, you get a start like that.
You should convert.
In the 20s, that's not good enough.
Exactly. I agree with that. I also think for Jason Roy, it would also be nice to maybe have a little bit more stability around him up top the order. So Nolan Ryan, talk about his numbers all year long. He's not scoring more than double digits. I think maybe he hit double digits once in the season. And so then you're trying to be the aggressor. I think the beauty of the partnership between Roy and Narayan is Roy can just be the stroke player, and Narayan's going to be the brute force guy who's going to score those couple boundaries. And then Umluk gets in, and we know Umluk, he's terrific bat, but he's not the brute force guy. He is the stroke maker. So now Roy, I think, tries to get into a gear, and oftentimes you see him get to 27, a couple dot balls played, gets on strike after a single, and then he tries to force it. And I think there's that mindset. There might be a mindset thing. There might be a disconnect between him and the coaches. I just think he's got to get into his little bubble and play his game of cricket, because he can score at 140 if he just plays his natural game. It might take him the entire innings to get to 140, but he's going to get there. It's just, I think there's this disconnect from his mind of, well, we're in the power play. Will McJohn just played 3 dot balls. We got a single. We need boundaries. And then he throws the wicket away, and then you spiral down. I just think for Jason Roy now, year 1 didn't score, year 2 got starts, and you're hoping in year 3 it's okay, he's going to convert on some of these.
Well, and you mentioned Sunil Narine, 2, 6, 5, 0, 8, 6. Now, the other part of that is that he obviously bowls 4 overs of quality spin every game.
Yes, absolutely.
And he did contribute, but he was taking up space at the top of the order. He was almost, in a sense, how I describe Stephen Taylor nowadays, in the sense that Stephen Taylor looks like more of a spin bowler, and any runs you get out of him is a bonus because he just becomes so unreliable with the bat. And you justify having Stephen Taylor in the lineup if he's not scoring runs? Well, Sunil Narine, slightly different case. He's recognized traditionally for the spinner first. But still, if he's opening the batting, and that's an established role for him, grand total of 27 runs in 6 matches doesn't cut it, and that put more pressure on not just Jason Roy, but the entire lineup. Do you think there should become a point, where either Sunil Narine himself or team management above him had an arm around the shoulder, little chat, and say, Sunil, I think we need to go with plan B at the top of the order. You need to move down to 7, 8, 9, and let's have somebody else give it a go because this just isn't working? Or do you think it's just a case of, well, this is our plan, we're sticking to it, come hell or high water?
It's an interesting question, Peter, because last season it was, hey, you're coming in 7, 8, 9, didn't score. I think maybe had 1 innings. And this season, he's coming off a really hot IPL. He looked fantastic up top of the order, scored all those runs. And you're just expecting him to pick up where he left off. And these wickets a little bit trickier here in the States than in India. And didn't find it.
So much easier batting in the IPL when the pitches are so batter friendly. It's a lot more challenging. We're given the true tests in America. These are the wickets where you're getting battle tested and you got to show what you're actually made of.
Wait, look, I didn't say that was Peter Della, but don't come after me. But what I'll say is I think that maybe you look, not because he's a bad captain, but I think maybe you shift the captaincy away from Sunil Narine. I think you let Sunil Narine do what he does best. I think he holds himself back at times. I think there are often times with the ball in this tournament where I thought he could have come in and been more aggressive early. I think you might just be thinking about a lot more things as a captain. We've seen, Sachin Tendulkar wasn't a guy who liked being a captain, right? He just, they talked about there was just a lot of pressure, a lot of things to talk about. And this is one of the best cricketers to ever live, right? So maybe shifting that captaincy to somebody else. Now, who do you give it to? Do you give it to a guy like Dre Russ? Do you give it somewhere else? I know that Sunil Narine is the captain for the Knight Riders organization all around the world, so it's kind of a hard thing to do. But I just think maybe you shift that away, and it could free him up a little bit more in a tournament where he is struggling. I don't know. I think you keep Narine up top of the order just because he's had so much success there. But I can honestly, and to me it all depends on your domestics, to be honest with you. If the domestics stay, the domestic bats are the 3 same domestic bats, or 4 with including the Ganesh. So Narine comes in the middle, because then I give my domestics the best chance to succeed, and Narine will figure it out in the middle because that's where he's played there before. Now, if you change your domestics and say Jamar Hamilton comes available, you snag him up in the draft, and you're able to snag up a couple guys who can bat a little bit later, then I would throw him back up top because you have some depth in those positions. So I really think your domestics, to me, would dictate how I use Sunil Narine in the game.
Just looking back at an article I wrote last year, recapping the draft at the end of the season and evaluating which teams got the best value for their picks and which picks were the worst. I had Stephen Taylor as the biggest bust for 2023 in terms of draft pick, primarily because he was a first-round pick, $75,000 slot, and yet he only faced 37 balls, scored 30 runs, including 2 ducks, and he took 1 wicket for 86 runs across 13 overs. $2,500 per run scored is how I evaluated Stephen Taylor, and that's not very good value, but at least he took the field last year for MI New York. Aditi Ganesh has just pushed Stephen Taylor aside as the worst draft pick in MLC history in terms of value because he never got on the field. And when that happens, it's just going to make everything else difficult in terms of all the things we talked about. Now, as bad as it was tonight for the Knight Riders, could have been way worse because they had 2 reviews that were upheld in the power play. Both Rashid Khan and Nash Kenjige had wickets that were given out on field that were overturned, thankfully, on review. That could have been a million times worse for the Knight Riders. But Kenjige and Rashid Khan both kept plugging away. Kenjige finishes again 2 for 22, both wickets caught down the ground, heaving towards long on, long off. Trent Bolt taking both catches, first David Miller and then Saif Badar, and then Rashid Khan, I mentioned before, Jason Roy, as well as getting Nitish Kumar out and Spencer Johnson. But I want to talk about Kenjige because this is, of course, U.S. Cricket Daily. We got to focus on the Americans here. I'm on Kenjige, the pride of Auburn, Alabama. Had a great tournament last year that helped propel him into USA's T20I setup when he'd been left out of the squad since 2018. And he has that magical day against Pakistan, taking 3 wickets in the T20 World Cup. He's been superb again throughout this tournament and in a must-win match, 2 for 22. What impressed you the most about the way he went about his business today, Alan?
I think with Nash, it's he's always been a guy that can hit a line in length. And oftentimes he would hit the line in the length and then he'd let the batters make the mistake. I think what's been impressive to me as he's developed over the past 4 years and then especially in these 2 years with Major League is how much more aggressive he's gotten with the way he bowls. You see him take the attack to the batters. He'll slow things up way earlier than he did before. He'll push the ball wider, try to jam you up. He changes lengths. He's been in this setup, and you can see he's learning and always thinking about how to bowl in a T20 system. And for a guy that was always great in ODIs because he was just so consistent, Pat Cummins-esque, where it's like you're on a line in length, and the batters are going to have to do something special to score, and they'll make that mistake. And T20 is very different, right? You have to be a little bit more aggressive, and you have to be searching for those wickets, and he's done that in spades. He's developed that game, and to see it just kind of come together. And for MI New York, how lucky are you to still be in playoff contention? Because this was a team. When you ask anybody who watched the first season of Major League Cricket, and you come back into season 2, and you say, what domestics play for MI New York? They say, I don't know about the batters, but one guy that has to play is Nash Kenjige. And they start the season without him. And it's almost like last year, where they start the season without Nash, and then it gets to crunch time. They put in Nash performs and keeps them in games. And again, I've been so impressed with the way he's grown over the past 4 years, and he's so vital to this team. And I'm so excited to see him bowl in the playoffs.
You talked about what a thinking guy he is. I mean, to me, I would argue he's the most cerebral of all the USA players, even more so than Saurabh Netravalkar. I mean, he just thinks very, very intently, not just with his bowling, but with his batting too. I mean, when I see him bat for USA, thinking where he started with his career as a number 11 and where he's worked his way up, sometimes getting in at 5 or 6 for USA, he's more regularly down to 8 or 9. But he just looks at the field, and his number one objective is to hit the ball where the biggest gap is. He doesn't care where the ball is bowled. His sole mindset is, all right, if there's a gap in mid-wicket in the ring, I'm just going to shuffle across my stumps, and I'm just going to look to tap it and run it 2 before the boundary rider can charge in and cut off that 2. Or if fine leg is vacant, he's just going to walk across the stumps, and he's going to try and play a scoop shot. Doesn't matter where that ball is bowled, he's going to try and scoop it, even if he's considered a tail ender. Or, if cover is brought in off the boundary and the leg side boundary is stacked, well, he's going to back away from his stumps, and he's going to try and go over the top on the offside because the offside boundary is vacant. He's just always thinking about where his highest percentage option is, and he does that on his bowling too. I mean, the things he talked about, bowling wide of the crease, looking at the field setting, where's the short boundary, where he can force the batter to try and, if the batter's targeting a short boundary. He's going to drag it wide outside off to try and force him to yank it as far as he can across his body to hopefully get a top edge or do something other silly mistake to trigger a wicket. And like you said, that aggressiveness, he's attacking. He's not looking to contain. You might say, oh, well, he should be playing a containing role because he's got Rashid Khan at one end, and should be Rashid who's the one who's taking all the wickets, and he's got to tie up an end and bowl in partnership. Well, their idea of bowling in partnership is both attacking. They both want to take wickets, and that'll bring even more pressure. And that happened tonight. They were responsible for half the wickets to fall. But one of the biggest wickets, if not the biggest, and the biggest celebration by far, Aaman, Pollard, first ball of the final over. Andre Russell, if he stays in, that could be the difference between 130 and 150. And instead, Pollard gets him out. Superb catch by Nicholas Pooran running out from behind the stumps. And there's a lot of emotion. You see Naj going crazy with his wicket celebrations. You see Rashid Khan with plenty of emotion. You saw Pollard with the emotion on his face. Nicholas Pooran too, when he takes some big catches, he goes wild. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of emotion in this team. But Pollard taking that wicket, and the captain demonstrating that emotion. Everybody kind of following his lead, I guess you could argue. What kind of impact do you think that made, if any, on the game? Do you think realistically they could have gotten a 150 or 155 if Russell had stayed in the end, or do you think the wicket, seeing how the chase played out, was insignificant?
No, I think that's, to me, that's the game changer, because I think Pollard had both game changers in both innings. He had that wicket and then the string of boundaries he scored. And the reason I say that is, all right, you saw what the top three did for MI New York, right? They go out, they score around 50, and they're like, okay, we don't even need 100 runs, right? We need under 100 runs now to win this game. So you can take time for a guy like Nicholas Pooran, for guys underneath him, right? Heath Richards can take his time. Pollard doesn't have to come in and hit the ball right away. He doesn't even have to hit the ball. He just has to get ones and twos, and then is starting to up the ante. So to me, the 130 made a big difference in this game because it was a slowish wicket. It was hard to bat on. Sunil Ryan was bowling, I think, his best stuff of the tournament. And we saw Spencer Johnson was tough to put away today. He looked deadly as ever. So it was going to be tough. Cornet Dry was spectacular in this game also. I thought he bowled really well. So you're going to have to dig in and play deep. And what you did was you gave Dewald Brevis time to get going. Even though he took Josh Little for some runs, he didn't have to go berserk. He didn't have to score from the get-go. He got to 142, but it was just pushing it around the ground. And then the one Josh Little over, I think, kind of hit the complexion of his innings. But it just allowed the game to settle in, and New York never faced any scoreboard pressure. You turn that to 150, and now that when Pooran gets, or when Brevis goes, when Clinton goes, when Penna and Aaman Patel goes, when Heath Richards goes, Mario Shepard, plays the reverse sweep and fires it straight to Dre Russ. It's now, holy smokes, we got a lot of work to do in this game. So for me, that wicket there was the biggest moment in that first innings. And then, again, that string of boundaries Pollard hit, the best he's looked with the bat all tournament. Again, it could be another case like last season. New York is just peaking at the right time. They're starting to get their ducks in a row. This team was always bowling great. It was just about getting the batters to fire, and not all the batters did. But they got an opener to fire. Nicholas Pooran, still Nicholas Pooran, and Kieran Pollard in the middle is batting well. And when you have those three working, that was a recipe. That recipe can work for MI New York.
Yeah, when Pollard came in, they needed 40 off 30 to eclipse Knight Riders on net run rate to get to that 18.2 over mark, the target. And then he just went crazy, and it was a very anticlimactic finish, I would argue anyway. Another talking point, Ali Khan's usage. We discussed this earlier in the season. It looked super intelligent against Texas Super Kings when he had that 3-wicket burst late, starting with Devin Conway, to help get a Player of the Match award and beat Texas Super Kings. But multiple occasions, we've seen you leave him to bowl exclusively the death overs, and some of the targets they were defending meant that he was effectively nullified and out of the game before he even had a chance to make an impact. Again, hindsight can be 20/20, but Ali Khan's usage He only bowls 1 over tonight, takes 1 for 10, getting Nicholas Pooran out, LBW, at a stage where the match was more or less over. They needed 5 runs off of, I believe it was 14 balls at that stage, so the game was over. As a flagship player in this tournament, American or otherwise, how would you evaluate how they used him?
It looked great on opening night, like you mentioned. I think that, honestly, Ali Khan's usage rate looks worse because the batters just couldn't perform. We're not talking about this team scoring a lot of runs. And, I think that when you have a guy like Spencer Johnson, he's going to open the bowling. Andre Russ, I thought, bowled pretty well in this tournament. Cornet Dry looked terrific in this tournament. And, you get a guy like Ali Khan who can get the ball to reverse a little bit. And, so you expect him to kind of fill that role. The problem for LA was that they just didn't have the runs to utilize that very well. I think had it gone throughout if they were able to get to 170 consistently this tournament, I think Ali Khan's right up there amongst the wicket takers because it got harder to bat on these wickets, and with his ability with the sling, with his ability to hit those Yorkers, I think it could have been a lot more effective. Could they have used him opening? Sure, but was Cornet Dry terrific? Absolutely. Is Spencer Johnson always going to open the bowling? Absolutely. And you've seen, Josh Little comes in, Cornet Dry doesn't bowl a second over, right? He has to wait till that 4th over to go ahead and bowl. So everyone has got to adjust. Do I mind Ali Khan being a guy who's going to bowl in the back end? No, because if the batters get to 170, 180, well, those are the most important overs in the game, and I want to trust Ali Khan with those overs.
One other question about this game, and also with an eye forward for the playoffs for MI New York. The batting order, specifically the domestics. Ruben Clinton, 8 off 13, got his bell rung, got hit in the helmet with a bouncer. You had Pennand Patel, 2 off 6. Stephen Taylor, judging by Pollard's body language a couple matches ago when he put down a chance, and combine that with the fact that he's not scored many, if any, runs. Stephen Taylor is safe to say he's in the doghouse for MI New York. Shine Jahangir, who was so fantastic last year at the top of the order for MI New York, again, has not performed. They've tried to cycle through options. Nobody's been able to step up really with any level of consistency. We saw Pennand Patel did make a half century early in the tournament, but that continuity in terms of his performances hasn't quite been there. What would you do going forward into the playoffs? Does Ruben Clinton keep his spot? Do you give Stephen Taylor a second, third, fourth, fifth chance to redeem himself? Do you think about Shine Jahangir? What is your mindset? If you had Robin Peterson's job or Pollard's job in charge of MI New York, what would you do in terms of shuffling your domestic options? And also, you've got Ehsan Adil on the bowling side as well. What would you do?
I think Ruben Clinton, for me, keeps his opening spot. You get a righty-lefty combination. I think he's played well enough in the tournament. I think his last couple innings hasn't been his best, but he started the tournament off hot. And I think what you need from him is not a guy who's going to come in and bat and strike the ball at 140. They're going to guys go from 100 to 120, sticking in, holding a wicket down, and just giving some time before Nicholas Pooran has to come into the batting lineup. I think he's done enough to keep his spot there, so I don't mind him in that position. I think Heath Richards, to me, stays in this team. I think he earned his spot with the way he comes in at the end and hit the ball, and that's kind of a trademark of where MI New York are so successful, or the MI franchise is so successful, that middle order that can come in and hit. I think that he also gives you a bowling option if you wanted to use it. You probably don't use it, but I like the combination of Heath Richards and Romario Shepherd. One, the two of them you feel can fire on any given night, so I like Heath Richards in the team. I think that Rushil Agarkar bowled really well today. I really actually liked what I saw from the young man. He's got a good pace. He swings it, and he uses bounce very well. And I think when you look at a guy like Ehsan Adil, he's much more of a movement off the surface guy versus you see a guy like Rushil who does move it, but he's kind of, it just feels like he's grown up the fastest bowler in every league he's played in. So he tends to just nail it in short and try to use those deliveries there, and he looks good. And I'm always a fan of getting the young guy in there. I don't mind either way you go. I think Rushil's probably earned his spot after tonight's game. I think the question for me would be Monak Patel and Shahin Jahangir. And I think if Shahin is batting at his very best, it's very good competition for Monak. We've seen Monak score a half century, so you think he's gotten his spot. But if you see Cheyenne start to figure it out, I think he can be a very good option at 4 because we've seen him come down the order and play a lot of innings that way. So if he starts to fire, I think he's a guy you just have to think about getting in there. And if he starts to fire, then maybe you think about putting him in there and taking Heath Richards out of there. So I don't think the domestics are going to be set for this playoffs, to be honest with you. I think that Ruben Clinton has got his spot. I think Nash Kenjige has gotten his spot. And then from there, I don't think they know who's going to play. I think Heath is going to play the next game. I think Monak's going to play the next game. Beyond that, I don't think they have a clue who's going to play the games after.
After his 50 against Pakistan and then having the shoulder injury that kept him out of the rest of the T20 World Cup, he's come back in for MI New York 8-5, 61, 4-5-2.
Yeah.
So it's boom or bust. And a lot more bust than boom.
The problem is, Peter, the scores from the guys who are sitting there on the bench aren't much better. Stephen Taylor hasn't found success in this tournament. Neither has Shahin Jahangir. Before the tournament started, I would have told you Shahin's going to open every single game. I don't know who's going to be at the other end, but I thought Shahin was going to open every game because he was just in such a run of form in 2023. Hasn't found it in 2024. It happens. Can he find it now? Who knows? But there aren't a lot of options for New York.
There's two ways to make life difficult for selectors. One, when everybody's firing and you're scratching your head, who do we leave out? And the opposite end of the spectrum is nobody's firing, and you're trying to figure out who the hell do we actually stick into the 11 and cross our fingers and hope they can actually perform. And that's the boat that MI New York is currently in. Well, they're going to have a couple days to figure it out before the playoffs get going. And again, a reminder that they have 2 days off, and then the first playoff eliminator will be on Wednesday, and it'll be MI New York against Texas Super Kings. We've got a couple dead rubbers. Well, not necessarily dead rubbers. We got a top of the table clash, and then we got Texas Super Kings and Seattle Orcas round of the schedule. We got the Unicorns and the Freedom. Then let's talk about that one quick. Unicorns and Freedom, top of the table. They're going to face off again in the qualifier on Thursday night. The winner of that goes through to the final. The loser drops back to face the winner of the eliminator. If you're either Freedom or Unicorns management, do you play your best 11, or do you keep an ace up your sleeve and maybe rest a couple guys without showing your best hand?
I'm playing my opening batters. So for San Francisco, I'm making sure Matt Short, Finn Allen see as many balls as possible. If I'm Washington, I'm making sure Andres Krause, Travis Head, Steve Smith see as many balls as possible. Maybe Russian Ravinder, throw that in there too. And Glenn Maxwell. I want to get my batters in form. So Josh Inglis, Corey, Sanjay Krishnamurti. I want to make sure that they're playing because these are tough wickets. And you don't know if they're going to get better, if they're going to open up a new strip, or if they're going to play on this strip to close the tournament. So for me, I want to get my batters flowing, get them playing. I don't need to play the bowlers I'm going to play, like all of them. I don't need to play Marco Janssen if I'm the Freedom. I don't need to play Lockie Ferguson. I can play Andrew Ty. If I'm San Francisco, I can go in and maybe I don't play Carmine LaRue. Maybe I go somewhere else. And then, I like to see them just go down their depth chart. Yasser Muhammad, I'd love to see the leggy get a game on wickets that are turning. Get Kareem McGore in there, let's see those guys. I'd love to see some just opening of the bag. Let Jamar Hamilton get a game. So I like to see them dig in their bench a little bit, but I personally wouldn't play the pace bowlers, just too much risk injury for me, and then I try to just see if I can get in some of those guys that maybe haven't seen a game and guys for the future that I think I can build on.
You mentioned Kareem McGore, who's played previously for USA, Yasser Muhammad as well, leggy from New Jersey. Akhilesh Bodhagam. We need a guy from Nashville, Tennessee. We need a Tennessean get into the MLC starting 11. Represent. We've already got a guy from Alabama in Kenjige. We need somebody up in Music City. Akhilesh Bodhagam, raised in Hyderabad but born in Nashville. That would be one more pin placed on the U.S. map of players represented. We need to make that happen. All right, fan mail time. Hello at uscricketdaily.com if you want to send us in a question to be read out on the next edition of the podcast. Rahul Says LA Knight Riders were just shooting themselves in the foot for fun with their batting. How did they fail so badly with this lineup? Well, Aaman discussed many points, starting with the draft. Is there anything else you want to add to what we've already discussed in terms of why they were so bad?
No, but I think we hit everything hit everything. To be honest with you, again, nothing from Sunarayan, and then I just thought the order just didn't quite make sense. Nitish Kumar, Saif Badar batting that low. Probably didn't need to say it. And David Miller at 4 could have saved him a little bit. Just a lineup that just didn't have any kind of fluency, didn't have any consistency, and just didn't make sense with the batters you had on there.
Yeah, they were shot themselves in the foot with their batting because they shot themselves in the foot with their draft picks. This is some epically bad drafting. This is shades of the New York Jets taking Blair Thomas with the 2nd overall pick back in 1990, and Kyle Brady at number 9 back in the 95, 96, and the guy I'm thinking of Cedric Jones, New York Giants, taking a guy who was blind in one eye with the 5th overall pick on the defensive line. And there's some very bad draft picks I can remember over the years for the Jets and the Giants, and Aditi Ganesh is right up there with them. I mean, yeah.
Well, let's hope that they can get a game at some point in next Major League and maybe get that comeback player of the year award or something. Just prove it all wrong.
First overall picks. I'm trying to think. Tim Couch didn't exactly have a glamorous career. Jamarcus Russell. I think Aditi Ganesh might be the Jamarcus Russell of Major League Cricket. Jamarcus Russell.
Yeah, we at least have to get Aditi a game before we can make that adjudication. You know, you have to get him in the team before you can just say. He might be the Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields is a pretty close example. I know Justin Fields wasn't taken 1, but 1st round pick, gave him chances maybe. The jury's still out. I would say on the Ganesh.
I don't think he can get worse than Jamarcus Russell. Ryan Leaf, people give him a hard time, but he was 2nd overall. At least Peyton Manning could say he went first, and Ryan Leaf had to live up to the comparisons to Peyton Manning. Jamarcus Russell, no excuse. The Raiders bombed. For people who don't know Jamarcus Russell taken 1st overall, back 15 or so years ago, coming out of LSU, and lasted 2 years, was cut, and has never played in the NFL again, and is easily one of the worst draft picks in any sport, 1st overall. Alex asks, is Rashid Khan the greatest T20 bowler of all time?
He'd be right up there. I don't think Alex is far off. I'm trying to go through the list of bowlers I'd put ahead of Rashid Khan. I'm sure statistically, I'm sure there's somebody up there that's probably better, but I think when you just talk about the impact, guys like Jasprit Bumrah, maybe Sean Tate from Australia, there's been some great T20 cricketers, but I think Rashid Khan's right. I don't think you're far off if you were to say that Rashid Khan's the greatest T20 bowler of all time. I wouldn't sit there and have a huge problem with you saying that. So, Alex, I think you're onto something there.
It's a yes from me. Bethan asks, who would be your dream overseas player to appear in MLC 2025?
Whoa, that's tough. Peter, you take this one to start. I'll circle back with me. You start.
I'm gonna give a tip of the hat to Andrew Leonard for this one. Dipender Singh Airi from Nepal. Yeah. We need some Nepalese flavor in MLC. Get the stick of dynamite. Dynamite Singh Airi. Dipender Singh Airi. He does it all. He bowls incredible off spin. He's one of a handful of players in history to hit 6 sixes in an over in an international, doing that for Nepal, and his fielding is dynamite. He's a stick of dynamite. So Dipender Singh Airi would be my pick, Aaman, now that you've had some time to think.
No, that's a great one. I've talked to so many people in the crowd who's talking about the wanting Nepalese players, so I think that'd be a really cool thing to get those guys in there. I think Mitchell Marsh would be fun. I know he was technically part of season 1, but he left to go score 100 in the Ashes. Boo-hoo. It was more important. The Ashes are majorly now. Do your thing. Go score hundreds in the Ashes. But I think Mitch Marsh would be really cool. He just seems like a fun individual. Bats, bowls, hits the ball incredibly hard. I think he'd be a fun guy to get into Major League.
Well, there you have it. And again, if you got questions for us, send them in. Hello at uscricketdaily.com. We'll try and squeeze them in the next episode, which we'll be recording after the conclusion of the top of the table clash between Washington Freedom and San Francisco Unicorns. But that'll do it for this episode. A reminder that we will also have an interview this week with British journalist, broadcaster, and writer Amal Rajan, who will be coming on the podcast. We've had some great guests over the course of this season of MLC cricket and U.S. Cricket Daily, and Amal Rajan will be added to that list, so we can't wait to have him on. But until the next episode following the match between the Unicorns and the Freedom, that'll do it for this edition. I'm Peter Della Penna on behalf of Aaman Patel. We'll see you next time on U.S. Cricket Daily.